Again, welcome to Make Testing Easy with GitHub with Rizel Scarlett. Rizel Scarlett is a developer advocate at GitHub. She moonlights as the director of programs at G Code House, an organization aimed at teaching women of color and non-binary people of color to code. Rizel believes in leveraging vulnerability, honesty, and kindness as a means to educate early career developers. Welcome, Rizel. I'll now turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Pam. Hi, everyone. I'm super excited to chat with you all about making testing easy with GitHub. So I'm just going to jump straight into it. Let me make sure. Okay, cool. The arrows are working. So I'll start by just talking about the pains that I found with testing. So I don't know if anybody here can relate, but I just never really learned how to write good unit tests or good automated tests. When I got into software engineering, I initially went to a coding boot camp and they never talked about testing. After that, I landed a job and then I went into college and they still never covered testing. I expected college to fill in some of those gaps, but they never covered how to write good tests. I just followed patterns that I found in my code base. I also felt like there's not really enough time to write tests. I don't know if other engineers have experienced this, but oftentimes your product owner, your product manager, and the rest of your team will be like, yeah, this feature can be done in 2 days, but they're not including the time that it will take to write tests. So oftentimes I was just rushing, copying and pasting and being like, I hope this works. But I have found that with the launch of GitHub Copilot, I think that it can reduce some of that pain. So if you don't know what it is, it's an AI pair programmer. And for me, it's increased the velocity and increased my velocity and reduced the time that I've used to focus on syntax. So today we're going to go over what is Copilot, what is Copilot Labs, the different use cases, and I'm going to do a couple of Copilot examples and an example of using Applitools eyes as well. I would love if the audience could be patient with me as well with those parts because GitHub Copilot is not exactly perfect. And like I said, or like Pam mentioned in my intro, I'm all about vulnerability and kindness and honesty. So this is just me being honest that GitHub Copilot's not always exact and perfect. So we may have to tinker with it a little bit. Really quickly, I know Pam already mentioned me, but my name is Rizel. I'm a developer advocate at GitHub. I actually just started about 7 months ago. Prior to that, I was a software engineer for 3 years. I'm also the director of programming at G Code House, which teaches women of color and non-binary people of color to code. I'm passionate about tech education or teaching people about tech. And then I'm also passionate about my own learning. I'm also hopelessly addicted to Twitter. So feel free to follow me on any platform, any social media platform at Black Girl Bites, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, whatever, I will follow back. So the technologies you're going to see me tinker with a little bit today are Copilot, Copilot Labs, GitHub Actions, and Code Spaces. My focus is going to be more on Copilot and Copilot Labs, but just want to let you all know about some of these things since you may not know, you may not have used these before. So with Copilot, that provides predictive text for programming. That's a bit of a tongue twister for me. And then Copilot Labs is something completely different. It depends on Copilot, but it's more of an experimental tool that the GitHub Next team is using to put out more experimental features around GitHub Copilot. So right now, the 2 features that it has out is that it enables you to translate your code from one programming language to another. So let's say you had Python code and you wanted to translate it into JavaScript, you can do that. Or if you had JavaScript code and you wanted to translate it into Java, you can do that as well. And then you can also have the option to have that code be explained to you in plain English. There's also GitHub Actions, which is a little bit older, and maybe people are already familiar with it. It basically automates software workflows, including CI/CD, automated testing, builds, and deploys. And then you have Code Spaces, where you can write and run code in your browser. These are just going to be quick screenshots of what to expect with Copilot. So on this side, I have, or on the left side, I don't know if you all can see my mouse, but on the left side, I wrote a comment that says, write a binary search algorithm. I started writing the function, so I wrote const binary search equals, passed in some arguments, and then Copilot is doing all the stuff below it. It's kind of anticipating what I may need. It's inferring that, like, oh, Rizel's trying to write a binary search algorithm. Maybe she'll need this. So that's the magic of Copilot. You also have Copilot Labs. It looks like that. It's a sidebar on your VS Code where you can like highlight a snippet of code, and then you can say translate that code into Python, and here's the binary search algorithm now translated into Python. You also have GitHub Actions, where people may be familiar with. Basically, depending on certain events, you can write some YAML in your GitHub repository, and depending on certain events that happen in your repository, whether it's a pull or a push or an issues created or something like that, it'll go ahead and do some automated workflows for you. In this example, it looks a little fuzzy, so sorry about that, but in this example, it's running a UI test before someone merges to the main branch. And then you have code spaces where you can write code in your browser. The cool thing about it is you can sync your settings from VS Code to code spaces. So if you had a certain theme you liked, you had extensions, user snippets, you don't have to go ahead and reset that all up. You can just turn on setting sync and it'll do all that for you. In addition to that, one of the benefits of code spaces is that you can have your environment ready to go. You can set it up so that like your source code, editor extensions, project dependencies, commands, and everything are already all downloaded within code spaces. And it kind of reduces the time it takes for us to start up. There's been times where I'm like, okay, cool, I have to code today. And I spend like the first hour just setting up all the parts of my environment that I'll need. So why use Copilot? Looks like some of my slides didn't translate well on here, so sorry about like words falling off. But why use Copilot, right? It sounds cool, like it could translate code, it could predict code for you, but like why would you use it? So I thought of a couple of use cases that have been helpful for me thus far. First of all, it helps me to write better comments because like with the comments, you can't just write anything and expect Copilot to get it. The more specific you are, the more actionable you are, the better it is for Copilot, and the easier it is for Copilot to pick it up and predict what you'll write. And if you don't believe me, I actually wrote some code. I wrote a VS Code extension the other day. It was my first time writing a VS Code extension, and I didn't know if I was doing it right. And I had a principal developer advocate from Microsoft review my code who's on the VS Code extension team, and I was getting ready to hear like negative feedback. And he's like, the code is gorgeous, so easy to read and well commented, love it. I was like flattered, but I was like, okay, I cannot take all the credit. Copilot definitely helped me out. It can even sometimes infer what comments I want to write. So it really helped me out there. A use case, the second use case for Copilot is that it just helps you to code a little bit faster. Sometimes you're sitting there trying to remember regex or like some other thing that you're always you don't do too often, but you're like, oh, this problem again, and you have to go back and look through Stack Overflow. Instead of doing that, you could write a comment or you could start writing the code, and GitHub Copilot will go ahead and infer that for you. The third use case is peer programming with a coworker. I know some people love peer programming. For me, I get a little bit nervous because I don't want people judging me that even though I've written or I've mapped through an array multiple times, somehow I've forgotten again. So that always makes me nervous. And I'm like, oh my gosh, they're going to watch me Google how to map through an array again. But with Copilot, I can kind of get it to autofill that and remind me of the syntax. The fourth use case is with writing tests. Like this is a workshop mainly about writing tests, and oftentimes I think For me, with writing tests, I'm usually like, oh, how do I get started? Especially for unit tests. Am I using knock, mock, whatever the keywords are? I don't remember. But we're writing a comment. GitHub Copilot can kind of infer that for you. And then once you start getting a hang of it and you have that pattern going, and you have a little bit of lines of code, GitHub Copilot will be like, oh, okay, I see what you're trying to do. And it may try to autofill some of it for you and help you to get those tests done a little faster. And then the last one for GitHub Copilot that I think is helpful is for live coding at conference talks. We're going to see it happen live today. I'm a little nervous. I try to avoid writing code live, but I think it's going to be the best way to show codes Copilot. So we'll see this proof happen in action. But yeah, oftentimes people make mistakes. They have misspellings and stuff like that when they do live coding. And it's even worse just because people are watching you. So GitHub Copilot comes in handy there. Also for GitHub Copilot Labs, which is a little bit different, like I mentioned, this one is what's translating code and explaining code to you. Why would you want that at all, right? One of the use cases, I think, is getting comfortable in a new code space. Code base, sorry. Basically, if I'm starting a new job or I found a new open source project, I'm often looking at the code like, what is that? Like, I don't know why they did that, what it's doing. You can't use Copilot to like explain the whole code base for you, but if you find a little snippet of code that you're like, I don't understand what's going on here, that's where Copilot Labs can be helpful to you. Similarly, Stack Overflow or understanding solutions on Stack Overflow can be helpful there as well. I know as a more junior engineer a couple years ago, I used to copy and paste solutions I found on Stack Overflow, and I'd be like, I don't know why it works, but it does. It would be much better if I knew why it was working, and I think using the explain code feature on Copilot Labs would be helpful to me. I see a question. I'm quite new to Copilot, so it prompts the code suggestion based on keyword binary searching. Yeah, I'll go through that a little bit more. I'll go through the binary search stuff a little bit more. You'll see it in action, and then you can ask me afterwards if you have more follow-up questions. The third use case is just gaining that additional context for different data structures and algorithms. So I think a lot of times when I say use Copilot to help you study for interviews, because y'all know how it is, right? You had a job for 4 years and now you have an interview and they're asking you to remember stuff you learned in college. Like you have to remember a bag or a linked list or some kind of data structure. And you're like, I don't remember this stuff. I think it's helpful as an additional context for learning these things. So I'm not saying solely depend on it. Still do your leak code, still do your code wars, still read Eloquent JavaScript or whatever other books that help you. But I think Copilot Labs, seeing why it's working and what's going on is helpful there. Another use case is for mentoring or debugging with someone who prefers writing in a different programming language than you. So this is a use case that I've encountered because I mentor or I run the program at G Code House, right? So there's 15 women of color, each cohort that go through the program. I teach them HTML, CSS, JavaScript. They go on and learn more, and then they go on to get jobs. Some people come back and they're like, oh, I got a job writing Python and I need help. And I feel completely useless because I don't know Python. I only know JavaScript, Node.js, anything JavaScript based, that's me. But I'm not going to be writing Python or Java, and I can barely understand it. So when they give me their code snippets and they're like, I need help, I'm looking at it like it's complete Greek. But I think Copilot Labs is helpful for me because I can just copy and paste what they have, translate it into JavaScript code, and then I'm like, oh, okay, here's what's going on. I do want y'all to note that GitHub Copilot is in technical preview right now, so it's in beta mode and not everyone has access to the feature. You do have to join the waitlist if you would like to sign up for the technical preview. And I also want to note, we're going to see it a lot during the demo, which I'm a little nervous about, but GitHub Copilot is not perfect. We're still in beta mode, so as you're using the feature, feel free to submit feedback as you use it, we actually have a little section on the VS Code extension where you can submit that feedback. So let's talk about how to use it really quickly. Essentially, if you've been approved for the technical preview and you're not on the waitlist anymore, you can go ahead, go to VS Code or Code Spaces or whatever. So like it's available in Visual Studio Code, NeoVim, and JetBrains, and you can install these extensions. The first extension is GitHub Copilot, and then the next extension is GitHub Copilot Labs. And I'm gonna just collapse the Q&A for a second so I can get back to talking about the slides, and then I'll get to the Q&A. But thank you so much. So for Copilot examples, I'm going to do one where we can discover an API. So I'm going to try to post a static site to GitHub Pages using Copilot. And let me go ahead and share my screen for this. Give me a second. All right, hopefully you all could see that. And cool. Just making sure that you all can see it. Oh, this is not the right one. Okay, cool. I have a ton of demos and a ton of windows, so bear with me. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go ahead and write a comment that says, and let me just make sure the extensions are in fact installed, because I've had that problem before where I thought it was installed and it wasn't. Okay, perfect, it is installed. So I'm gonna say create GitHub Pages static, spell that right? Static site. All right, and I'm gonna start it off for GitHub Copilot, and hopefully it starts to fill it in. So I'm gonna say post to GitHub Pages, and go ahead and do that. Hopefully, I'll keep coding until it starts doing it. Oh, this is not exactly the code I want, but we'll keep it going. But as you can see, GitHub Copilot is doing its thing a little bit. I'm going to import OctoKit. OctoKit. Cool. So we've seen it autofill even my import statement, and I'm going to go ahead and use OctoKit. So if you don't know what I'm doing, I guess it doesn't matter too much, but basically I'm just trying to post a repo that I have to GitHub Pages and see it live. So I'm writing out the code for that and hoping that GitHub Copilot infers that for me. So it started to already, which we saw. Cool. Not exactly what I want either. So as again, GitHub Copilot tries to do its own thing. So I'm going to try to make sure that it does what I want. And I'm going to just copy and paste this part. Okay. Hopefully it goes ahead and does the whole thing for me. Here we go. I'm going to word wrap, enter. Cool. So we have most of it. I just want to change it to use my stuff rather than whatever it's picked up. So it kind of picked up the idea that okay, we're going to use an API, a call to post to GitHub Pages, who's the owner, what's the repo name, what's the source. And I'm also going to go ahead and close off this try catch. Okay. Error. Console log error. Awesome. It filled that part in for me. I'm going to change the owner to Black Girl Bytes because that's my GitHub name. And the repository I'm going to use, I'll show y'all it really quickly. It's going to be GH Pages Applitools, and inside of it, it's just the index.html file with an H1 that says Lost in the Sauce Gucci Mane. So I'm going to copy and paste this as the repository. And I just want us to see it happen live. And we're also going to change this to be the branch and path. Oh, it kind of already inferred that for me. Awesome. And the path here, my branch name is actually main, and the path is actually going to be this. And we'll remove these quotation marks. So let's see it happen in action. And let me figure out, I'm missing, oh, I added an extra parentheses. Cool. I'm going to call it, and let's pray to the demo gods that this actually works. I tried it like a million times and it worked then, but we know how things can be. So I'm going to call node live demo.js and 404. I think it's because I changed my GitHub token right before this, but that's okay. We'll move on. Basically, you guys got the idea that, again, it kind of inferred what I was going to do and why. Let's look at another example. I just don't want to spend too much time. And my next example is going to be that binary search algorithm, which I think is definitely going to work out a little bit better. So I'm going to delete all this right here, and I'm just going to write a function that says write a binary search algorithm, and hopefully it starts to trigger and writes out the rest of it. The thing with GitHub Copilot is that it's sourcing from other code, so it may have different results at different times. So write a function, or I'm going to say write a binary search algorithm. Search algorithm. And I'm going to say const binary search. Okay, cool. We already see it kind of inferring what I want. So left, cool. I want to move my cursor. I'm going to move it so that it can do this a little bit better. I'll start typing for it. And I actually I don't want this necessarily. I want to do let middle equals, there we go. It knows what I'm trying to do. Let middle equals not.floor. Cool. And I just wanted to autofill everything. Thank you, GitHub Copilot. You were going a little slow. We're missing a couple things, so basically, you see here, it kind of inferred the rest of the binary search algorithm. I'm going to do a few more examples. And this is going to be, we're going to build a rock, paper, scissors game and write unit tests for it. And I promise you this one will work for real. So let's go ahead and say we want to write, or we want to write a function please rock, paper, scissors. Cool. And you saw it kind of finish off my comment and kind of infer what other comments I want. I don't want any more comments. We know what we're doing, right? So I'm going to go ahead and also just require this thing called prompt, which is going to prompt me on the command line. And you saw it already autofilled that. And I'll write function rock, paper, scissors. If I could spell, would love for GitHub Copilot to help me out here, but it doesn't want to. All right, cool. There we go. Finally, GitHub Copilot, you came through for me during this demo, but we see it autofill everything. It has player one, it prompts player one, it prompts player two, and then it determines if it's a tie, who wins, who loses. Let's run this in my terminal. So rock, paper, scissors. Cool. I'm going to do node live demo.js. And there we go. Player one, choose rock, paper, scissors. I'll choose rock. Player two, I'm pretending to be, and I'll say scissors. And then player one wins. Awesome. Perfect. We saw that example. Finally, something worked for me. It's crazy because I practiced over and over again, hoping that GitHub Copilot would get the other ones, but it didn't all the way. I have one more before we go into the Applitools eyes examples. And this is just to show that regex works in Copilot. So just gonna delete all this, and I'm gonna go ahead and do like phone number validation. That's something that I often have to do for some reason. So I'm gonna say write a function to validate a phone number. See, it already knows. I'm gonna say with regex, and let's see what happens. So I think I'll just go ahead and start. Oh, it was doing something. Man, I hate when I interrupt it. But function validate phone number. And come on, Copilot. Sometimes it takes a little bit. There we go. Awesome. So we see it creating a phone number. We see it getting that phone number value. We see it using regex here. And it's kind of inferring like, okay, if you were using the front end for this, it'll change the background color to green if the phone number is correct. And if it doesn't use that 10-digit phone number stuff, it'll be red. And I need to show y'all how Copilot Labs works as well. So I'm going to highlight this, and I'm going to go to the extension here. Just because it's really big. Usually if it was more zoomed out, you would see all the extensions, but because I've zoomed it in all the way, I have to go here, and so you can see there's two little, what are these, drop downs, one called explain, one called language translation. So if I highlight over this, I can go ahead and get an explanation of what's going on here. So I'm gonna press explain code, and let's see what Copilot has for us. What is going on? What's happening? And it has a step-by-step explanation that we're declaring a variable called phone number. We're checking that it's in this format with the three digits with a dash, another 3 digits, and 4 digits following it. I think this part's really cool because I think it just gives more context to what is going on in the code. And if I wanted to translate this to another language, let's say I want to translate it to Python. We can see here that it's done that. I can't read Python, but for my Python lovers out there, to let me know if this is correct. It looks right to me. I've seen that def keyword before, so I think it's looking good. Now for the one that's scariest for me, I'm going to go ahead and show I'm going to show Applitools eyes with Copilot. Give me a second. I'm going to stop sharing and let me get things set up for that. Just got to switch over. Tools, examples. Okay, cool. I am bringing it up now. And I don't know if y'all realized, but in those demos, I was actually using code spaces right there. It looked just like VS Code, didn't it? But it was code spaces. So for this example, let's say you are tasked with adding Applitools to your code base and you've never used it before, right? I've been in a situation where I worked at a company and we were adding something called Mabel, which is automated testing as well. I think it's pretty similar to Applitools. And I'm like, I've never used this before, but I'll have to learn, right? And so if you're in that situation and your team's like, hey, I want to add Applitools to our code base, and you're not really completely sure of all the syntax and all that's needed, I think that's where Copilot would be helpful for you. I am just talking to let my stuff load, so give me a quick second. Setting up code spaces takes a little bit. Alrighty, we are ready to show you. I'm gonna press here. All right, hopefully everyone can see that I have a, let me drop these down. I have a file open called classic runner example test.js. So obviously I've already written this a little bit before, so to like remove the little issues that Copilot would have. So I'm gonna jump in and make sure Copilot's installed. It is. I'm gonna jump in and just start typing some stuff. So I'm going to type use strict, and I'm going to import some of the things that we'll need. We'll need builder and buy from the Selenium WebDriver. So I'm going to start saying const builder And hopefully, let's see. Oh, there we go. Copilot knew exactly what I was trying to say and knew that I wanted to get those from the Selenium WebDriver. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy and paste the rest of the imports. We don't need to see this part, right? So I'm going to save and do that. And then I'm going to start off writing the test by saying describe demo app ultra fast grid. So I'm definitely not a Applitools expert, so I'm really going to be depending on GitHub Copilot right now to help me out. I'm going to have let runner, eyes, and driver. And it already kind of started inferring that for me. I'm going to say before async, cool. Thank you, GitHub Copilot, coming through for me. And I want to create a new Chrome WebDriver. So let's see if GitHub Copilot is able to pick that up. There we go. So it knows that I want to have some Chrome options on creating a new Chrome driver this way. Next line is not exactly that. Thanks for trying, GitHub Copilot. But next line is I want to check my environment, and if I'm in a CI environment, that would be true. And then I want to do options dot headless. I don't need that. Headless. And I don't think I'm going to type out every single thing. I already have a pre-made one that I can show y'all after this, but I just wanted to show you guys some of it, just being able to be typed out this way. So we have .build. I'm going to do like a little bit more. I'm going to try to create a runner with a concurrency of 1. Runner with a concurrency of 1. And with that, I'll do const runner options equals cool and test concurrency 1, perfect. And then there we go. It's already starting to infer that. Thank you. And it now knows already what I want to do next. I didn't even have to write the next comment because it says create an eyes object with runner, meaning it'll be a visual grid eyes. So let's see it happen. Eyes equals nuance runner. And then we're going to initialize, not exactly that. Thanks, Copilot, but that's not what I want to do. I want to initialize the eyes configuration. So I'm going to do that. The eyes configuration. Right. And now is when I want to use my API key. And then after that, I want to set the batch info. So I'm going to say create new batch info instance and set it to the configuration. That's what I wanted, I think. And I made it go away. Conf.setBatch with new batch info and then ultra fast grid demo. Okay. I'll stop right here. I think you all kind of get the idea that if I was trying to implement Applitools eyes into my project and I wasn't that familiar with exactly the syntax and what I would need to do next, GitHub Copilot can help me out. I know a lot of people think, oh my goodness, like Copilot's going to take our jobs. As you can see, Copilot can't really work without me. Right? It's a co-pilot, not a pilot. So it still needs my brain to know what to do next. Sometimes it's assuming that it should do something else next, but that's not exactly what I want to do. It's kind of like the predictive text that you'll see in your emails. Like if you ever use Gmail, sometimes I'm like, good afternoon, hope this email finds you. And then Gmail writes, well, I'm like, perfect. That's exactly what I wanted. Sometimes it doesn't say exactly what I want, but it's trying to infer all of that. The next thing I want to show, in addition to being able to like use Copilot here, is we have GitHub Actions. So for people who aren't familiar with that, again, it's automated software workflows, and you can automate running tests as well. So in this repository or inside of this folder, we have a couple of actions, and you'll basically write them in YAML in the .github/workflows folder, and any file you have with .yaml will be considered in an action here. So basically, I have an action that on push or on pull request, it'll go ahead and run the test, right? And maybe you're looking at this and you're like, what is going on? I have no clue what uses actions checkout v2 is. Let's try GitHub Copilot Labs to explain some of that for us. What I found is like when I copy and paste the whole thing, it's a little bit harder for GitHub Copilot, but just copying little bits and pieces is helpful. So I'm going to start with just this part and show y'all, not the language translation, but the explaining. So it can tell us what the code is doing here. It says only triggers on pushes to the main branch, only triggers on pull requests to the main branch, and so on and so forth. And then let's look at the steps a little bit. If we're like, what's happening here? I have no clue. We can say ask Copilot again, and it'll say this is going to check out a copy of our repository. So that's what actions checkout v2 does. It's going to set up Node.js with the latest stable version. Then it's going to install it, and it's going to install the Chrome driver, and then it's going to run the test that we have in classic runner example test.js. I already have this in a repository on GitHub, so I am going to go here. Not exactly what I want to do. Repositories. Oh, actually, I already have it, so leave me. So as you can see, I ran a couple workflows. Some failed, some passed. But if I click this one and I say I want to rerun the workflow, instead of me actually pushing something to the code base, you can force trigger it by just rerunning the job. If I press rerun jobs, it's going to go through all these steps. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger for y'all. And so we can look at like the steps that each job is taking. And here's where you'll read the logs for GitHub Actions. So give it a couple seconds to start up. It may not take too long. I think it may take like 40 seconds in all to run this whole thing. I'm gonna refresh. Let's get going. Okay, cool. So it was already doing it. So here we can see that it set up the job. We can see that it's checking out that repository, as we saw here where it says uses actions checkout v2. We can also see that it's using that latest Node version that I specified. So it's not really the latest, but the stable one that I wanted to use was Node 12.6. We can see it installing NPM, and then we can see it running the Chrome driver. And now it's going through running these tests. So fingers crossed that it's going to pass. Still going through running the test. Let me refresh it because sometimes it's already done. Okay, cool. We can see some of the logs here, right? So we can see that like ultra fast test actually worked out. 7 tests passed, 0 unresolved, 14 matches. And let me refresh one more time. Still going, still going. It's going a little slow, but I guess I can talk through. Okay, here it is. It's cleaning up the job, and I'm assuming the test passed. Yeah, so the benefit of this is, let's say someone ran tests, finished the feature, said everything was working, it works fine on their machine, which could happen. And then once they're about to merge it in to main or production or staging or whatever, things break because the environment's different or people also have other features coming in here. You can kind of do like an extra check, an extra protective barrier by having these tests run before you merge it into production. And you can also say like, hey, if these GitHub actions don't pass, don't enable merging for people. So let me stop sharing my screen and go back to these slides. So as you can see, it's not magic, right? You saw me struggle a little bit, which was a little embarrassing, but I think it's good to see that this is not magic at all. Like it's not going to just do its own thing and be able to write code by itself. It can't always read my mind. There are times where I'm like, wow, this thing is so smart. And it will not always spit out the most perfectly well-written, up-to-date code. I've had moments where it's used API versions from like 0.1 or something like that, and the API version's like on 2.0. So that's happened. And then also Copilot increased, like, to me, Copilot increases my confidence and velocity as a programmer. Oftentimes I've felt held back because I'm trying to worry about the syntax. I'm like, oh, is it const, is it var, is it let? But with Copilot, you just fill that all out and you can go back in and just double check to see that everything is right. I want to thank Applitools for letting me speak and listening to my expertise. I'm happy to answer any questions next.
Cool, awesome. Well, thank you, Rizel. That was really nice. I feel like I learned a lot just by watching. So we have a couple questions here in the Q&A. So let's see here. John Miller asks, are there any security concerns about Copilot? And then why you study showed 40% of code generation has security vulnerabilities.
Oh, that is a good question that I'll probably have to get back to you on. I know in terms of like getting finding the code and stuff like that, like how GitHub Copilot's getting it, they're using OpenAI. So there's like a couple of loopholes there, but I will have to get back to you. Definitely like message me on LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever, and I will get you a better response.
Awesome. Okay, here's another question from Siva. Is Copilot free?
Yeah, so right now it's free. It's in a technical preview, so if you go into like the wait list, it'll be free for you.
Nice, nice. Can you ask Copilot for number of multinomials and see if it finds something?
Okay.
I'm not sure about that
do you
one.
want me to like demo that? I will say I could try it offline. As y'all saw, there was moments where it wasn't always working, so I could try it offline and then like hit me up, and I will. We can work on that together.
Sure.
But
Yeah, all good. So here's another one. How does Copilot know what we are trying to write? Is it based on the comments that we're writing? Is it based on the code that we're kind of filling in? How can it be so smart to figure that out?
yeah, I think it's based on two things. I think it's picking up from like the comments. It's probably also looking at like I believe the way OpenAI is working is it's looking at other like open source code bases and being like, oh, okay, here's patterns that we've seen in code already. It's like machine learning that's happening. And so it's like, okay, cool. I've seen this comment before. I've seen this type of code before. It's also picking up on different patterns that you already have in your code. So if it sees you doing like dot assert a million times or whatever to what are this stuff in testing, like to be exactly or equals or something like that, it'll notice like, okay, we're doing a pattern here. So I think it's really just like using machine learning based off of like open source code bases.
Awesome. Very nice. Well, that seems to be all the questions we have in the Q&A, unless somebody wants